Look around you right now. In every room you walk into, an invisible, high-stakes game of psychological dominance is being played. Most people have no idea it is even happening. They go through life believing that influence is about who talks the loudest, who makes the best logical arguments, or who has the most charismatic personality. That is an absolute lie. The most lethal forms of human influence are completely silent. They happen below the threshold of conscious awareness. Right now, your brain is firing thousands of subperceptual signals every single second, interpreting microexpressions, physical posture, ocular movement, and respiratory timing. When someone who understands behavioral mechanics enters your space, they don't try to convince your logical mind. They bypass your conscious filters entirely and speak directly to your autonomic nervous system. They can make you feel a sudden urge to agree, force you to leak your private thoughts, or compel you to seek their validation without ever raising their voice or making a direct demand. If you leave this room or turn this off right now, you will remain completely blind to these silent levers. You will keep walking into social, professional, and personal interactions completely exposed, unconsciously handing over your authority, falling into subtle behavioral traps, and letting others dictate your emotional baseline without your permission. Stay with me for the next few minutes, and I will hand you the exact micro-behavioral toolkit to read, control, and neutralize these silent mechanics in real time. Human beings like to believe they are rational creatures making conscious decisions. In reality, over 90% of human behavior is driven by automated biological responses to environmental stimuli. When you understand how to manipulate those stimuli, logic becomes irrelevant. Control is not about aggression or loud persuasion. Control is about frame ownership. It is about establishing an environment where the other person's nervous system automatically defaults to your tempo, your baseline, and your expectations. The 5 covert behavioral mechanics that allow you to quietly command any room are these. First one is, before you say a single word, the social hierarchy of an interaction is already established through spatial mechanics. Weak individuals contract their physical footprint. They cross their legs, tuck their arms in, and make quick micro-adjustments to avoid invading anyone else's territory. To project silent authority, you must execute postural anchoring. Occupy space deliberately. Expand your posture, keep your movements slow and deliberate, and place your hands in open, fixed positions. When you step into an interaction, subtly take ground without rushing. When your physiology remains totally relaxed and rooted while expanding into physical space, the other person's subconscious mind registers you as an immovable environmental factor, forcing their posture to contract in response. Second is, when most people feel awkward or want to persuade someone, they talk faster and break eye contact to process their thoughts. This projects immediate internal instability. If you want to pull information out of someone or force them to yield control, deploy the ocular lock combined with a micropause. When they finish speaking, do not answer immediately. Count to 3 silently in your mind while holding a relaxed, unblinking gaze directly into their eyes. Do not scowl. Keep your facial muscles completely neutral. Silence combined with steady eye contact creates an unbearable spike in cognitive friction. Their brain interprets your silence as a silent judgment or an unspoken challenge, compelling them to keep talking, qualify their statements, or surrender crucial leverage just to break the psychological pressure. Third is, every human nervous system naturally seeks synchronization with dominant environmental rhythms. This is the law of autonomic entrainment. When sitting across from someone, Subtly match their breathing cadence, vocal tempo, and physical baseline for 2 to 3 minutes. You are establishing a covert biological link. Once the synchronization is established, deliberately shift your state. Slow your breathing down into your abdomen, drop your vocal pitch, and lengthen the pauses between your words. Because you built the initial pace, their autonomic system will unconsciously follow your lead, dropping their heart rate and placing them in a highly open, suggestible physical state under your direction. Fourth one is, human psychology operates heavily on the law of reciprocity. If you demand honesty or deep information directly, people build an immediate defensive wall. Instead, lower their guard using a calculated, low-stakes confession. Share a small, seemingly private flaw or a minor secret about yourself in a quiet, conspiratorial tone. Your willingness to expose a vulnerability tricks their brain into registering you as a trusted ally. To balance the psychological ledger, their subconscious feels compelled to reciprocate by revealing genuine, high-value information about their own motives, insecurities, or plans. The last one is, the ultimate test of authority is your immunity to external provocation. When someone tries to test your boundaries, drop a subtle insult, or raise their voice, their goal is to hijack your baseline. If you react, you lose. If you explain yourself, you surrender. Execute the cold frame. When hit with a provocation, freeze your facial mechanics entirely. Let the comments sit in the air for 2 full seconds. Look at them with mild, detached curiosity, and continue whatever you were doing as if they made a minor sound in the background. Nothing shatters an aggressor's confidence faster than realizing their emotional weapon failed to register a single heartbeat of disruption on your system. These mechanics are not toys. They are precision instruments of human behavior. When you stop reacting to the world and start systematically directing the subperceptual signals in your environment, you cease to be a participant in other people's games. You become the frame. Master these silent adjustments. Guard your focus with absolute discipline and take total command over every space you enter. Strategic space invasion, combined with postural anchoring, is a primary mechanism for establishing immediate, nonverbal dominance long before a single word is exchanged in a social or professional setting. In human behavioral dynamics, physical space is an explicit proxy for social status, authority, and internal security. The vast majority of individuals navigate their environments in a perpetual state of spatial compliance. They unconsciously contract their physical footprint, draw their limbs inward, tuck their chin, and make frequent micro-adjustments to avoid intruding on the territorial boundaries of others. This default biological posture is an automated signal of subordination, announcing to every nervous system in the room that you perceive yourself as a low-priority entity seeking to minimize friction. When you step into an environment with a contracted posture, you instantly frame yourself as a passive participant, signaling to the room that your presence is contingent upon the implicit permission of those around you. To invert this dynamic and execute silent control, you must deliberately master the mechanics of postural expansion and spatial occupation. Spatial dominance begins by overriding the instinctive mammalian pull to make yourself smaller. You take up physical territory intentionally and without hesitation, expanding the width of your stance, resting your arms comfortably over nearby furniture, and maintaining a posture that projects unshakable physical ease. When sitting, you occupy the full volume of the chair, leaning back with an open, broad chest, rather than perching forward on the edge in an anxious posture of readiness. Crucially, your physical movements must be execution-focused, slow, and completely free of erratic fidgeting or unnecessary adjustments. Quick, jerky adjustments, such as repeatedly shifting your weight, fixing your clothes, or adjusting your hands, leak immediate internal tension, communicating to observers that your central nervous system is reacting to ambient social stress. By contrast, when your body occupies space with complete physical stillness and relaxed mass, you create a profound psychological effect on the surrounding environment. The human brain is hardwired through evolutionary biology to scan for environmental fixed points and territorial anchors. When your posture remains grounded, expansive, and entirely unbothered by the presence of others, the nervous systems of those in your field of view are forced to process you as a high authority, dominant presence. Because their brains recognize your spatial expansion as a marker of high status, their subconscious mind initiates an automated compliance response. Without realizing why, people will physically step back to give you room, shift their seating positions to accommodate your footprint, and adjust their physical orientation toward you. You have effectively dictated the spatial rules of the room without issuing a single verbal demand. This spatial control directly impacts the psychological frame of any subsequent conversation. When an individual is forced by your physical presence to contract their posture or yield territory, their central nervous system experiences a subtle, subconscious drop in authority. They enter the interaction already operating from a reactive posture, having subtly yielded the physical frame to you. From this baseline of nonverbal dominance, your words carry significantly more weight, your silence becomes far more intimidating, and your boundaries are far less likely to be tested or pushed. By engineering your physical footprint to claim space with calm, unyielding stillness, you establish an invisible framework of authority that compels the room to defer to your presence before you even speak. Deploying a deliberate micropause combined with an unbroken ocular lock is one of the most potent behavioral tactics for dismantling an opponent's psychological defense and extracting silent leverage. The vast majority of people operate under an intense, unexamined social compulsion to keep conversational flow continuous and smooth. When a person finishes speaking, the standard biological expectation is an immediate, comforting verbal response that validates their input and relieves ambient social tension. When you deliberately deny them that expected response, holding a steady, unblinking gaze into their eyes while remaining in absolute physical stillness for 3 to 5 full seconds, you introduce a massive spike of cognitive friction into the interaction. In that unyielding silence, the other person's brain immediately searches for an explanation for the breakdown in normal social rhythm, usually defaulting to self-doubt, anxiety, and an overwhelming urge to regain control over the interaction. During this micropause, the ocular lock acts as an inescapable mirror that forces the other person to process their own words without the softening buffer of your immediate feedback. Most individuals leak immediate internal instability through their ocular mechanics. When pressed or feeling uncomfortable, they look away, blink rapidly, or scan the floor to process their thoughts. By maintaining a relaxed, steady gaze with completely neutral facial muscles, you signal an absolute absence of fear, urgency, or social neediness. You do not scowl, glare, or display aggressive facial tension, as those reactions reveal emotional investment and give the other party something concrete to push back against. Instead, your facial stillness operates as a completely blank wall, giving them zero emotional data to evaluate while sending a clear subconscious signal that their statement failed to meet your threshold for a response. This deliberate silence creates a psychological void that human nature finds almost unbearable to leave unfilled. As the seconds tick by in silence, The other person's central nervous system interprets your quiet neutrality as an unspoken challenge, a sign of hidden disapproval, or a signal that you possess superior information that invalidates their position. To resolve the unbearable internal tension caused by the pause, they will almost always start talking again. In a desperate attempt to fix the frame, regain your approval, or qualify their original statement, they will routinely spill unprompted details, walk back their demands, reveal hidden motives, or offer concessions they never intended to make. They effectively bid against themselves simply to break the crushing pressure of your silent, unblinking presence. Pacing and leading another individual's autonomic state is a sophisticated behavioral mechanic that leverages biological synchronization to override conscious resistance and establish silent influence over their physiological and emotional baseline. Every human central nervous system possesses an innate evolutionary drive to harmonize its internal rhythms with dominant environmental signals. This biological phenomenon, known as autonomic entrainment, means that when two people interact, their breathing rates, speech tempos, physical postures, and neurological stress levels naturally attempt to find a shared frequency. Most people allow this process to occur entirely on autopilot, frequently absorbing the anxiety, rapid pacing, and chaotic energy of the person across from them. However, when you execute pacing and leading deliberately, you transform this subconscious biological drive into a precision tool for directing the autonomic state of anyone in your presence. The protocol begins with the phase of pacing, where your primary objective is to silently calibrate your physical baseline to mirror theirs without drawing conscious awareness. You sit or stand in a way that subtly matches their posture, match their approximate speech tempo, and unobtrusively sync your breathing cadence with the movement of their chest or shoulders. This is not explicit comedic mimicking, which triggers immediate psychological alarm bells. It is a soft, micro-calibrated alignment of biological rhythms. When you match a person's breathing and physical tempo, their subconscious brain registers a profound sense of safety, familiarity, and nonverbal rapport. Their defense mechanisms lower because their central nervous system no longer perceives your presence as an outside threat, interpreting the shared physiological rhythm as evidence that you are operating from the exact same internal wavelength. Strategic vulnerability anchoring leverages the psychological law of reciprocity to bypass an individual's conscious defenses and extract high-value information without triggering suspicion. Human social interaction is governed by a deeply ingrained biological imperative to maintain equity in exchange. When someone receives a gift, a favor, or a personal revelation, their central nervous system experiences an immediate subconscious pressure to balance the social ledger. Most people attempt to extract truth or gain trust through direct questioning, aggressive probing, or logical persuasion. These overt tactics instantly activate the other person's defensive filters, causing them to guard their motives, filter their words, and present a carefully constructed facade. By deploying a calculated, low-stakes disclosure first, you manipulate this fundamental law of reciprocity, compelling their subconscious mind to lower its guard and offer genuine transparency in return. The execution of strategic vulnerability anchoring requires precise calibration and absolute control over your delivery. The secret or flaw you choose to share must be carefully selected in advance. It must appear deeply personal, slightly raw, or socially risky, while actually remaining completely harmless to your true leverage, status, or long-term operational goals. When delivering this disclosure, you adjust your nonverbal mechanics to signal high intimacy and trust. You lower your vocal volume, slow your speech tempo, drop your pitch and lean in slightly, creating a tight conspiratorial frame. By adopting the behavioral markers of someone making an authentic, vulnerable confession, you trick the other person's brain into classifying you as a trusted ally who has just handed over personal leverage. This perceived gift of vulnerability triggers an immediate, automated shift in the other person's psychological posture. Their brain interprets your disclosure as an act of profound trust, which instantly lowers their threat perception and neutralizes their need to maintain a defensive posture. Simultaneously, the unwritten social contract of reciprocity kicks in with intense force. To avoid feeling socially indebted, uncomfortable, or unequal in the interaction, their subconscious mind feels an overwhelming obligation to match your level of openness. They feel compelled to validate your trust by offering a secret, an insecurity, or a confession of equal emotional weight. Without a single direct demand from you, they voluntarily open their psychological vault, offering up raw, unedited information about their true motives, hidden anxieties, or strategic plans. By mastering strategic vulnerability anchoring, you effectively turn the illusion of weakness into a lethal mechanism for information gathering and emotional control. You avoid the messy, high-friction work of interrogation or confrontation, allowing the other person's own social instincts to disassemble their defensive walls from the inside out. They walk away from the interaction, believing that a spontaneous, deep connection occurred naturally between two equals, completely oblivious to the fact that their sudden transparency was meticulously engineered by a calculated behavioral anchor. You gain total visibility into their internal baseline and true intentions, while risking absolutely nothing of real value, securing absolute strategic leverage while leaving zero footprint of your manipulation. The cold frame of non-reaction is the ultimate assertion of situational authority because it denies an opponent the emotional payload necessary to fuel their provocation. In human social mechanics, every attempt to provoke, bait, mock, or challenge an individual is designed with a specific operational objective: to disrupt your central nervous system and force your emotional baseline to mirror the chaos of the attacker. The aggressor relies entirely on your biological reaction: a flash of anger, a defensive explanation, a shift in facial posture, or an elevated heart rate, to validate their maneuver and confirm their dominance over the space. When hit with a high-friction provocation, the vast majority of people instantly default to a reactive state, losing their composure and playing directly into the frame established by the provoker. To execute the cold frame, you must systematically override the automated fight-or-flight response of your nervous system and respond with absolute, unyielding physical and emotional stillness. The instant an insult or test lands, your facial mechanics must completely freeze into a state of total neutrality. You eliminate all micro-expressions: no tight jaw, no raised eyebrows, no defensive smirks, and no subtle flinches. You hold a relaxed, unblinking gaze directly on the individual, allowing a heavy, deliberate 2-second pause to linger in the air before taking any action. In those 2 seconds of total stillness, you treat the high-stress statement not as a personal threat or a challenge to your status, but as irrelevant background noise that carries zero weight, equivalent to a minor sound in the surrounding environment. This complete absence of an emotional reaction causes a catastrophic breakdown in the aggressor's strategy. Because their maneuver relied on extracting a defensive or angry response to build momentum, encountering a wall of cold indifference leaves their projected hostility hanging in midair with nowhere to go. The emotional energy they deployed collapses back onto their own nervous system, creating a sudden spike in self-consciousness, awkwardness, and social anxiety. They are forced to sit with the public realization that their attempt to disrupt your frame failed completely. As you continue whatever task you were performing with calm, steady breathing, and unhurried movements, you send a devastating subconscious signal to everyone watching. The attacker's presence is so utterly insignificant that it cannot even alter your respiratory rate. Mastering the cold frame elevates your presence from a participant in social conflict to the absolute owner of the environmental frame. You demonstrate an unshakable sovereignty over your internal baseline, proving that no external actor possesses the remote control to your mind or emotions. While low-authority individuals burn through their precious cognitive bandwidth engaging in messy, defensive battles, you remain completely unbothered, centered, and locked onto your own priorities. By maintaining absolute physical stillness and refusing to acknowledge or validate cheap provocations, you turn every attempt to dismantle your authority into a public display of your absolute self-control, leaving your opponents completely powerless in the cold void of your silence.